Well, we're starting a new quarter beginning today, and it's the King and His Kingdom. We'll be sifting through the Gospel of Matthew. Today's lesson will focus in and around the birth of
Gordon, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, yes.
Oh, wonders will never cease. So, anyway, we'll be sifting through the Gospel of Matthew, all on the topic of the King and His Kingdom. Matthew does have a particular audience that he is writing to, and that is his main readership would have been directed to the Jews. You will have a reference to the kingdom of heaven all throughout the Gospel of Matthew, which is more acceptable to the Jew rather than mentioning over and over again the kingdom of God, although you will find several references to the term the kingdom of God. Another phrase that crops up is that which has or is being fulfilled or has been fulfilled. Jesus is the one who will bring the fulfillment of the coming of the Messiah and the earliest mention of the Messiah in all four Gospels. The date, anywhere from the mid 50s AD through 85 AD. Since we know Matthew 24 speaks of the destruction of Jerusalem, that the date that I would prefer is somewhere in the mid 50s to 60s AD. How is Jesus represented or presented in the Gospels? Matthew, it's all about the King and the Messiah, the anointed one, the promised deliverer. In Mark, Jesus is presented as the Son of God. In Luke, since he is writing to an individual, Theophilus, a lover of God, he presents the historical Jesus and continues writing to Theophilus in the book of Acts. And finally, John, who is not part of the synoptic gospels, the first three are Matthew, Mark, and Luke. John is quite different. He presents Jesus as the word of truth. When you study the genealogy of Jesus Christ, he starts with Jesus being a son of Abraham, all the way down through being related or included in the line of David, that Jesus would sit on the throne of David, which is mentioned in Peter's sermon in the book of Acts, all the way down through the line of Joseph, and then the birth of Jesus. Where is he who is born King of the Jews? That's an important distinction, and I'll get into that in a little minute here. Here is a map of that part of the world. A significant event by the time you get to chapter 2 in the Gospel of Matthew, an important, significant event had started to unfold in the heavens. Men came from the east, and we'll identify those in a few moments. Magi. Matthew is the only one who uses, or depending on the text that you're reading from, but wise men or magi are following, tracking a star that they've been looking at in the heavens. And for them, that meant a significant event, the birth of someone very important. And so they came from a distant land, Matthew chapter 2, verse 1. Here we have the first two verses. This will not be a verse by verse, chapter by chapter, but we'll be, as I said, sifting through the Gospel of Matthew, uh, trying to find out more about Jesus as the King and Jesus as the King of the kingdom of heaven. Now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, Magi from the east arrived in Jerusalem, saying, "So where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star in the east and have come to worship him." Well, if you're looking for a king, uh, I guess they thought, well, maybe going to a palace might be the best place to go. Uh, we saw a star in the east. Even though it shows here three camels, that doesn't mean to say three wise men. There's all a list of different traditions regarding how many they were. Here is a map showing the area. In the days of Herod the king, now Herod in 40 BC, because he palled up with Caesar Augustus, they became very good friends. Herod had been previously serving as a governor. He was put and assigned the title Herod, King of the Jews. He was not a Jew. He was from Edom or Idumea. And so he was not really from a line of Jews, traditional Jews. He was a foreigner of sorts. By the Senate of Rome, he was declared to be the official king of the Jews. Herod was a king, really, without a kingdom. He was the vassal king for Rome. So Herod was made, but not born as a king of the Jews. Herod was given the title King of the Jews by Caesar Augustus in 37 to 40 BC, and he was given a responsibility for ruling Judea after the Romans had defeated the Parthians. The Magi came looking for he who is born King of the Jews. Herod was appointed. He wasn't born a king. Jews, I think, were more comfortable living with the Parthians than Romans. They had a relationship from their days of captivity 600 years earlier. Many Jews had remained in Babylon after the three waves of Jews who wanted to return and rebuild. Herod was always suspicious that Jews would end up revolting and aligning themselves with the Parthians. So he really slung his hook with Rome rather than with anyone else. So let's ask, who were these wise men from the East? In the New King James Version of Scriptures, they are referred to as wise men. The NIV calls them magi. The Greek word for wise man is magos or magos. They were skilled at the interpretation of dreams, uh, an iromancy is a diviner of dreams. That was their key skill, along with studying what's up in the heavens. Not astrologists, but they were astronomers. Magi were from a hereditary Persian or Babylonian priesthood. They served in dual roles of priest and as government officials, even as diplomats. The priest for the Magi religion was established by Darius when you read, say, passages such as Daniel chapter 6. If you will recall, Daniel was an interpreter of dreams. And so, in his particular gift from God, he was considered a magi. He ended up becoming, during that period of time, as the head of the magi. They had a duty to select the kings of Persia and also helped with the Parthian Empire. They were, the Parthians were a potential enemy of Caesar. So when these guys show up from the east, I think it would have made Herod a little uneasy, and also all in Jerusalem uneasy with Herod at that time. So, to sum up here, they were the interpreter of dreams, and they certainly were acquainted and read the holy texts, the Jewish scriptures. From the 70 years of captivity, they may have had access, and they certainly did have access. Where is he who is born King of the Jews? Where would they have gotten that kind of information? They would have had access to the Torah, access to the prophetic writings. We have come to worship him, they said. Why would a select group of Medo-Persian magi come to worship a Jewish king? As I said, the magi were not Jewish. They're foreigners. They came to worship a foreign king in enemy territory. It is symbolic that the whole world would bow down someday to worship Jesus. Isaiah 45, verse 23, in the latter part of the verse, before me every knee will bow. Kneeling is a symbolic reference to reverence and submission. Kneeling renders one defenseless, and kneeling is a position of worship. Bow before the Lamb, kneel before Jehovah. The Magi were a royal corps of diplomats. They studied the movement of the stars and the planets, and they were scientists. They read a lot. They had a vast library of text to read, and I think the scriptures would have been one of those texts that they would have been interested in. To come that far into enemy territory. They journeyed from Babylon or Persia over there in Iran and Iraq, that kind of area. There were probably more than just three magi. We always assume it's three magi because of a popular notion, three gifts, three magi. I don't think just three men would show up on their own. They would have come with a large retinue, many camels, many servants. and perhaps with a military escort of sorts. Babylon or Persia is known for astronomers and the interpreter of dreams, amongst other ancient skills. Although there's one missing part of the puzzle that they didn't have. Jesus was born in Bethlehem, and they didn't have access to that particular prophecy. So that's why they went to the palace, I suppose. You think, well, a king, a palace, that's where you ought to go to find out. The Magi were obviously familiar with some of the scriptures, but with not all of them. Because the scriptures they picked up the idea of the promise of a Messiah or the promise of anointed individual, the king. They called him King of the Jews. I think they were perhaps using a phrase that Herod thought he had exclusive use to, the King of the Jews. They tracked his star from the east, from their original location, and continued to track the star as it appeared in the heavens while en route. Let's look at some of the religious traditions as they vary as to how many magi came. The Eastern Orthodox tradition, they said it was 12 magi. In the Western tradition, 3 magi corresponding to the number of gifts that they brought. The date from the Western tradition and the Eastern tradition, December 25th to January the 2nd, Epiphany, the 12 days of Christmas. Another tradition dating back to the 6th century, they give the names of the 3 magi, Balthazar, Melchior, and Gaspar. In the 7th century AD, the Magi were named for the sons of Noah, Shem for Asia, Ham for Persia, and Japheth for the rest of Europe. In the 14th century AD, the Armenian tradition, the Magi represented kings of Arabia, kings of Persia, and kings of India. Continuing reading the text, Matthew 2, verses 3 through 5. So when the Magi arrive, and naturally they've come to a royal palace, they wanted to find out where the newborn king was. The King Herod heard this. He was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. Gathering together, Herod called all the chief priests and the scribes of the people, and he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. It's amazing to me that no one had told this to Herod before. But, I think Herod was the kind of guy is he didn't like any news that would have upset his royal apple cart. They said to him, "Why in Bethlehem of Judea, your own province? For this is what has been written by the prophet." The news of a rival king certainly did worry Herod and everyone in Jerusalem. Herod was paranoid, and he was dangerous. A lot of good things some people say about Herod. He had a rebuilding program that certainly was to be admired, but he was totally an evil man to the core. Here was a group of rival kingmakers entering Jerusalem from the east. They traveled with their own protection and force. They had unimaginable oriental pomp and pageantry. I just don't think they arrived on foot. They came with a caravan of camels. Persians were an intimidating group of people, and the Herod and the Jews in the country, especially in Jerusalem, got kind of nervous. Matthew chapter 2, verses 7 through 8. Here is how devious Herod is and paranoid he is. Herod secretly, quietly called the Magi and determined from them, he calculated from them the exact time that the star first appeared. And then he sent them on a mission to Bethlehem. And if you will recall, we're in the middle of a census. All kinds of people are coming back to the places of their birth. The city is packed, as every city is packed in the Roman world, or in that part of the Roman world that was taken over by Rome. So he calculated with the help of others the exact time that the star appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and he says, go and search carefully for the child. And when you have found him, report back to me so that I too may come and worship him. If King Herod had been wearing trousers, they would have been on fire. Verses 9 through 10 of Matthew 2. After hearing the king, they went their way, and the star which they had seen in the east went on before them like a marker until it came and stood over the place. Not just Bethlehem, but stood over the exact location where the child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. X marks the spot. God uses a special star to signify this is where he is, the Messiah. When they saw the star, they greatly rejoiced. Their journey was about to be rewarded. The star is not over the stable. The star is over another location, but still in Bethlehem. Here is a mosaic that I believe is shown in Ravenna, in Italy. It shows the tradition of the three magi on horses and them coming with their gifts to Herod the king, asking him, where is he who is born king of the Jews, thinking he's had a son, a successor. Most kings are to be born in royal palaces, but not this one. The Magi would find the newborn king not in the stable, but in a house. By that time, most people who had come to register their name and location, their valuables, their assets, who they were and where they were living, and that would all be sent back to Rome for taxation purposes. Matthew 2, verses 10 through 11. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceedingly great joy. Note, when they had come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary, his mother, and fell down and worshiped him. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented the gifts to him: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Gifts for a king. Note, the family is now moved out of the back of in a cave or a stable, because the inn that they were looking to get lodging had no room for them. We calculate at this moment in time that Jesus is somewhere between newborn and up to 2 years of age. So some time has elapsed. 3 gifts imply 3 wise men, like the song, "We 3 Kings of Orient are." Not necessarily. Generally, at Christmas time, especially in plays and school performances, the wise men, the shepherds, the family, the donkey, the sheep, the animals in the stable are all there. It's all collapsed together. Not the way it's recorded in scriptures. I think they just collapse it all, so you just have one location to look at. And so he's living in a house, so note the upgrade from a stable. This is a depiction of the 3 wise men from the Church of the Nativity. When the Muslims took Jerusalem, they took down and defaced a lot of things that represented the Christian religion. But this one intrigued them, and they left it alone. If you will note, they are in Eastern garb, Babylonian, Persian kind of garb. And the tradition there is 3 gifts, 3 wise men. Old Testament references to Magi as kings, Psalm 72, verses 10 through 11. The kings of Tarshish and of the isles will bring presents. The kings of Sheba, Zeba, will offer gifts. Yes, all kings shall fall down before him. All nations shall serve him. This is to be treated as a messianic message from Psalm 72. Isaiah 60, verse 3, the Gentiles shall come to your light, the other nations shall come to your light, and the kings to the brightness of your rising. Remember from Luke chapter 2, old Simeon says, as a consolation to Israel and as a light to the Gentiles. What about the significance of their gifts? Gold perhaps represents deity for a king, a symbol of kingship on earth and in heaven. Frankincense represents a priestly element, the priesthood. They burned frankincense in the temple. It was imported to Israel from the east, even as far away as India. Myrrh represents death and sacrifice, used for embalming purposes or in anointing after one dies. It is more valuable than gold at this time. They came to honor and worship the true King of the Jews. So you have to ask yourself, why would a select group of Medo-Persian magi come to worship a Jewish king? As I said before, they weren't Jewish. They came to worship a foreign king in enemy territory. It was symbolic that the whole world had come to bow down someday to worship the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Isaiah 45, verse 23, part B, before me every knee shall bow. The Magi honored Jesus in three ways: as the Messiah, as the King, and as the sacrifice that would be made in Jerusalem on a cross. Verse 12 of chapter 2 of Matthew, the Magi, having been warned by God in a dream, they certainly were experts in interpreting dreams. They were told not to return to Herod. So the Magi left for their own country by another route. God communicates to the Magi through a dream. They were experts in dream technology, dream interpretation. Now we begin to see who Herod really is. Herod was the embodiment of pure evil. We know what heinous plans he had in mind, and that will unfold in the second chapter of Matthew as well. King Herod the Great was a cold-hearted, murderous monster. Just to give you an idea, in 35 BC, Herod's uncle Joseph was executed on his orders. 29 BC, Mariamne, Herod's wife, and Alexandra, Herod's mother-in-law, they were both executed, put to death. 28 BC, Costobar, Herod the Great's brother-in-law, was executed on his orders. 7 BC, Herod's sons, Alexander and Aristobulus, on his orders, they were also executed. And there are many unnamed individuals, nobles, and other people were put to death because Herod was suspicious of their presence. In 4 BC, Antipater was executed on Herod's orders. If a man is willing to murder his own sons, will he not be willing to murder other people's sons as well? There was a quote, "Better to be Herod's pig than to be a son of Herod." Here is a painting of the massacre of the innocents painted by Ludovico Mazzolinio around 1510 to 1530 AD. It's in the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam in Netherlands. The massacre of the innocents by King Herod. It's covered in Matthew chapter 2, verses 13 to 15, and also continue reading in verses 16 to 18. It was prior to this event that God makes it possible for Joseph and Mary and the child Jesus to escape to Egypt for protection, where they would remain until the death of King Herod. Here is the actual sarcophagus of Herod the Great. Herod died after a lunar eclipse somewhere around 10th of January 1 BC, according to the antiquities reported by Josephus. It was before Passover. Josephus does not mention the massacre of the innocents. Another date where there is a lunar eclipse is that, Herod in 4 BC is the traditional date of his birth. The one that's outside of that is the 1 BC date. However, it is recorded upon Herod's death, he would order the death of key nobles. He died in Jericho. He wanted key nobles to be rounded up and shot full of arrows in the amphitheater that he built. But the order, according to Josephus, was never carried out. Herod was totally evil. Whether you see him dying in 4 BC, coinciding with perhaps the birth of Jesus in 6 BC to 4 BC, and then there are others who plump for the 1 BC death. It would have been at least 2 years that the family would have remained in protection in Egypt until it was safe for them to return. The lessons from the Magi's visit. Number one, God connects the dots of history so that every prophecy about Jesus was fulfilled. It was during the Roman control of Judea. It was the time that the Magi visit and present their gifts. 2, God does the same in our lives in connecting the dots so that all things work together for good because we love the Lord. Romans 8:28. The purposes of God cannot be thwarted. So says Job 42, verse 2. Next week, we will study the king's temptation. I hope you've enjoyed this introduction to this new study. And now we will close the study.
Thank you, Gordon.
And I'm going to go on and go down to the church house.
Drive safe.
Thank you.